Once again, we welcome you to Moving Forward with Young Voices. We're happy to welcome a new contributor to today's program. His name is Jack Verrill. Jack, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Brian, for having me on today. I really appreciate it. So my name's Jack. I was born in Falmouth, Maine, born and raised there, and I'm now a sophomore at the University of Michigan. Been fascinated with politics my entire life, foreign affairs for most of that, and I'm a contributor at Young Voices.
I'm looking at a piece that you've written for the Daily Caller. Young people can't afford Trump's new war. And I bet you this is something that a lot of people would probably benefit from reading. Talk to me a little bit about, we talked a little before we went on the air, but, Trump would not have been elected to a second term if not for winning the vote of quite a few young people this last time around. And I see very, very clear place here where there could be a sense of betrayal based on promises, made during his campaigning versus what has transpired, since he actually took office, and particularly within the last couple of weeks. Talk to me a little bit about how we set the stage for discussing why young people can't afford, the current engagement that Trump has begun.
Yeah, Brian. So as you mentioned, I think that the president made three critical promises on the campaign. He said, number one, immigration reform. Number two, no more foreign wars. And number three, we're going to bring back the economy that to young people, your parents, your grandparents grew up in. To those latter two promises, Operation Epic Fury has absolutely shattered them. We're spending about $1 billion a day over in Iran right now. And that's $1 billion that not only we can't afford, but also $1 billion that could be better put to use in the United States, rebuilding schools, hospitals, physical infrastructure, all of that. And I also think it's important to mention that who are the people fighting in this war? It's going to predominantly be young people. We saw, unfortunately, some tragic deaths of U.S. service members, many of whom were quite young. And so I think this is an issue that's particularly salient for young people and a really stinging betrayal on behalf of the president.
You actually started this commentary on the Daily Caller with a quote from Hunter S. Thompson, and I think it's probably appropriate. We should share what he said. Do you have the quote in front of you, or if not, do you mind if I share it?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So the quote from Hunter S. Thompson is, this was written the day after the September 11th attacks in 2001. He wrote, "Generation Z are doomed to be the first generation of Americans who will grow up with a lower standard of living than their parents enjoyed. The last half of the 20th century will seem like a wild party for rich kids compared to what's coming now." That seems pretty prophetic.
It really is. And I think it's extra interesting to point out that that was not like an article he was able to publish in the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times. That was on ESPN's Page 2. And I think it's safe to assume that a lot of people, the war drums were beating. They didn't want to contradict the U.S. government's policy. And yet 20 years later, who was right? I think Hunter S. Thompson.
Well, and as one of the individuals who was paying close attention, and in my case, I was pretty outspoken against the run-up to the Iraq war. 23 years ago, it was much the same kind of thing where, there was a pretense for, there's a threat. And in that case, they were saying weapons of mass destruction and it couldn't be avoided and we just have no choice. And a promise, I think the word cakewalk was actually used by George W. Bush. It didn't turn out that way. It was 20 years of wasted treasure and wasted lives so that Iraq could continue to be completely unstable and Afghanistan could be turned over to the Taliban.
Yep. And I think it was yesterday in the Iraqi parliament, they were chanting death to America. And so, I know Bill Maher, he said a couple days ago that look at Iraq, it's way better now. They're much more peaceful. Like, no, they're not. Even though they might have these governmental structures that are ostensibly more democratic, they're still incredibly anti-America. They're anti-American influence. And it's also important to mention that during the Saddam Hussein reign of power, Iraq was a bulwark against Iran. And so this stuff, I think, is all a little more complicated than our policymakers make it sound, and just goes to show the real consequences of unending U.S. involvement in the Middle East.
I mean, it's for people who want to see something, show me the numbers, or it's not real. You can definitely, and you do make a very solid case for why economically this doesn't make sense. But it seems like there's a moral component to this as well, just as there was with the Iraq war. And give me your thoughts on where does the trust of young people stand these days? Maybe not just with Trump, but with with the leadership in Washington, D.C. in general? Has that trust been eroded?
I think that trust was eroded, particularly during COVID. And now, whatever was left of that trust, the last remnants of that trust are absolutely in the dustbin. I think a lot of young people looked at President Trump as kind of the last hope, as somebody who was an outsider, who spoke against the bipartisan consensus of war and economics. And for him to fall victim, again, by his own choice, he has agency. He chose to invade Iran. For him to do that, I don't know where young people turn. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of them are turning toward radicalism. We've seen the increasing popularity of people like Nick Fuentes, for example. And I'm sure a lot of them are also going to turn to nihilism, potentially not voting. We'll see. And I think it just goes to show, how important this presidency was. And for him to let young people down so profoundly is an error that we're going to be bearing the cost of for years.
And you mentioned also in your commentary that nobody really knows for sure how this is all going to unfold. I mean, there are things being stated with confidence. Well, it'll just be a matter of a few days or a few weeks and we're firmly in charge. But once that dog is off the leash, nobody can say for sure. And your generation is going to be the one that ends up doing the heavy lifting if this becomes a much more protracted kind of conflict.
Oh, exactly. I think, number one, anybody who thinks that they can guess how this war is going to go or estimate with any degree of confidence how this war is going to go is lying. And the one kind of honest thing that the White House has done is they haven't given us a coherent reason for this war. They haven't given us a coherent outlook for this war because even they know that everything's still very much up in the air. But that, I think a lot of people look at instability as kind of neutral, like, oh, it could go well, it could go poorly. For young people in particular, we need economic stability. We need a firm ground from which to raise families, to get good jobs, to buy a home, all things that are becoming significantly more difficult, both in this economy and, of course, because of geopolitical tensions in the Middle East. And so stability to me is kind of what young people are looking for in our politicians. And Operation Epic Fury is yet another example of Washington, D.C. just like playing with the economic and then the physical security of young people.
Jack, you had alluded to this earlier that, maybe these younger generations don't vote anymore. I mean, do the Democrats, does the opposition, at least in political power, do they offer a reasonable alternative, or is it more of a uniparty situation and basically you're going to get much the same, just under different management?
So that's a great question, Brian. I think in 2008, people thought that President Obama was that person. They thought that he was the president of peace. He was the president of change and transparency. By my estimation, he was not that. Look at Libya, look at Syria. All right. I think currently, if I had to give you a Democrat, it would be Representative Ro Khanna. I think that his economic program is a departure from neoliberalism, and his foreign policy certainly is far more urging restraint than, for example, Hakeem Jeffries or Senator Chuck Schumer. So it would be Ro Khanna. I think young people are still learning about him. He's a congressman from California. So if you're from the East Coast like me, you might not have heard about him too much. But he, to me, is somebody who is breaking the fold a little bit and is potentially, drawing these bipartisan bridges with somebody like a Thomas Massie or Marjorie Taylor Greene, who traditionally might come from very different sides of the political spectrum. But because of both the dire consequences of the events that are happening, and because I think the most salient difference in politics is like, are you pro-war or anti-war? Because of that, we're seeing this new political coalition, I think led by Representatives Khanna and Massie emerging. And I am really excited to see where that goes.
I'm happy to hear, kind of a hopeful tone there, because there are a lot of us who have been feeling very black-pilled lately.
Same.
Wow, no matter what we do, it seems like we always end up with kind of the same old problems. Again, we're talking with Jack Verrill. He is a Young Voices contributor from Falmouth, Maine. And Jack, I know that you're active out there and people can find your work and find you on social media. Where?
So you can find me on X at Jack Verrill, and then it's VERRI11 as opposed to LL. Don't be scared. I don't have a lot of followers, but we're getting there. And besides that, just keep reading my work. I'm really glad to be here, Brian.
Thank you so much for being on the program. I look forward to our next conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. Happy to welcome another new contributor to today's program. His name is Santiago Vidal Calvo. And since this is our first time meeting you, first of all, welcome to the show. Would you mind taking just a moment to tell us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Sure. Thank you for the invite, Brian. So my name is Santiago, and I'm a cities policy analyst for the Manhattan Institute, where I do research on immigration, labor markets, urban policy, and foreign policy. Most of my work also involves doing FOIAs, or Public Records Request Act, which I launched throughout the U.S., and we have many interesting projects on FOIAs. I'm originally Venezuelan, so I was born and raised in Caracas, and I moved here to the U.S., and I did my undergraduate, my graduate degrees here. Currently, I'm doing my PhD in Texas A&M in political science. So I'm very happy to be part of Young Voices. I'm a recent contributor, and very happy to be here in the podcast.
Well, I'm glad to have you, and we have a very timely topic to discuss. It's unreal, but it's just a couple of weeks ago we were watching parts of Mexico burning after El Mencho was first taken into custody and apparently died, as a result of the conflict of taking him into custody. Talk to me about why his fall as a cartel leader is good news for the U.S.
Well, we're talking here about a case that, it's long overdue. Many of these cartels around the continent, so first to lay the background, many cartels in Latin America have acted without impunity and have grown exponentially because there hasn't been a cohesive strategy from the United States to Latin America to stop cartels beyond our front steps. And the real reason is because many of these cartels have found safe havens across Latin America to build and expand operations with many arms within the political corruption of many governments. They have created even narco states, like it was with Venezuela, where the cartel of the Suns captured a whole government, and it was essentially acting with international amnesty of a government that we give to many leaders around the world. So many of these cartels grew exponentially, and there was a lack of cohesive strategy in the continent from the United States to stop them. And El Mencho's fall is part of the renewal of this strategy. It's part of the renewal of the Monroe Doctrine, where we saw not only foreign enemies or big empires as enemies to the United States influence, but also cartels are part of the Monroe Doctrine. And El Mencho's fall falls within that category.
So I have to wonder, what is it that gives the cartels such power and influence? And I have to think there's something beyond just money. Obviously, they're making immense amounts of money, but what is it that allows them to grow and to, for that matter, arm themselves, to where they kind of become a de facto government of sorts?
Well, it's two main things, I believe. And the first one is that cartels, especially in the last 2 decades, have really found a strategy that has, become unmatched across the world, which is the infiltrated military structures of many countries. And once you have a military arm, then essentially the security aspect is not as important as it was before. When we had Pablo Escobar and his cartel in Colombia, this cartel has essentially to arm itself up from illegal armament and, drug trade money. They used it to essentially create a private security for themselves. So once you have the military involved, then essentially you're using public money to support your operations. And this is what is happening across many states in Latin America, considering Ecuador, Venezuela, and Mexico, some of the biggest distributors of cocaine and production of drugs in Latin America. They have used the military to their advantage. The second point really is a political one, is the fact that many of this drug illicit money, it's involved in other areas of also society, like human trafficking or like minerals or oil production in many countries. They have involved themselves in very important political areas where the government actually has a big interest, and they have found themselves to be another business, really, in many other countries, when really what they're doing is illegal. They're creating a net harm to society and also to the United States, and they are using many of the government's infrastructure to advance their business interests.
In your article, which was published on The Hill, you talk a little bit about some of the things that, some of the advantages that come for those who are trying to stop the cartel when leadership is taken out. Like after El Mencho's death, I think you mentioned that that's a moment of opportunity for those who are trying to stop the cartels. Why is that?
Well, in reality, when a leader falls, most of these cartels are reorganizing themselves. And let's think a little bit like a criminal for some once. Criminals want power. They want to become bigger and stronger, and they want to make more money. And the reality is that when you take a cartel leader out, the succession line is not as clear as it could be. Many of these people are going to try to get that succession seat. And the reality is that if we have a coherent strategy from the United States, especially with information, with financing a lot of the military of these countries to actually fight the cartels, if we involve a lot of our intelligence apparatus in these countries and we can actually provide them with resources to fight the cartels, these are the moments where the cartels are most vulnerable, when they don't have a succession line, when making decisions is actually difficult for them. A lot of the backlash that we saw in Mexico, it was because the cartel didn't know what to do. There wasn't a coherent strategy from the cartel, and they started just shooting around. They started blowing up cars. That's what people do when they're desperate. And in reality, a lot of these cartels, when you take out the head, they become desperate. See what they happened in Venezuela. You took out the head of the structure, which was Nicolas Maduro. You arrested him and took him out. And the next 2 months, which have been foreign policy of the United States, which I believe has been exemplary, have led to the Venezuelan cartel reducing its drug operations, releasing political prisoners that had in power, and essentially becoming a transition ground, giving a lot of the tools to the cartel to dismantle itself. And if we can do this across Latin America, I think we are in a golden opportunity to bring down the drug trade and human trafficking networks in the continent.
I know that people who are against prohibition, and frankly, in many ways, I am too. I believe, that maximum liberty makes prohibition kind of a non-starter. But how do we stem the demand for drugs, which are what the cartels often use to enrich themselves? And for that matter, if we take drugs off the table, will they just find something else to illicit to supply that would likewise bring them those obscene profits?
Well, the reality is that the drug market is very, very specific and very unique in its sense. You cannot put in the same category, at least I cannot put them, the drugs and gambling, for example. I think there are two different categories. I think cartels have existed because they are in a monopoly of some sort. They have acted itself in a way because drugs cannot be created in very different ways. The only way that you can create them is either illegally or legally with the pharmaceutical companies. So in reality, drugs have found themselves in a niche, in a monopoly, and they have exploited the cartels have exploited those mechanisms to get into the American consumer, to create a demand that in reality, if we were able to have more strategies from the government to reduce at least very harmful drugs like cocaine and heroin and fentanyl, if we had very good strategies, we would see less Americans dead. 80,000 Americans died in 2024 because of the fentanyl and opioid crisis in America. And those are American families that at the end are harmed by the cartels. Whenever somebody asks me, why are we in Mexico involved militarily and intelligence? It's because of the 80,000 Americans that died. It's very simple. It's many families that have been heartbroken and separated because of drugs, and futures that we have denied of Americans because of other people's interest in money. So this is really my answer.
And let's talk about money for just a moment too, because I think you mentioned in your article as well that this is one of the ways that the wind can be taken out of the sails of the cartels, and they can be shown that they're not invincible, is by taking away the source of their power, which is their money. What can be done to better address their ability to operate financially?
Continue security agreements and partnerships like we do in Colombia, expand military information agreements. We can put more agents on the ground in many of these countries to help military build up their resources. A lot of it comes from financing and information. If we give them good information, that's mostly the important part. And just quickly before we end, many argue that this is a huge market, illicit market of trillions of dollars worth of drugs. But I ask them, how much money could we earn if all of these families didn't have drugs? All of these families had their fullest maximum potential. Isn't that the purpose of liberty, for people to find their fullest potential? And if there are drugs in the middle, they won't find them ever. So my question, in my answer is, I think the full potential of these people are infinitely more than the drug cost of the United States.
Again, we are visiting with Santiago Vidal Calvo. He is a Young Voices contributor. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X on Santiago Vidal C, and you can find me in Instagram in Santiago Vidal 5. Also in the Manhattan Institute page, I publish bi-weekly on City Journal and other places.
Welcome back to Moving Forward with Young Voices. Happy to welcome a contributor that we have spoken to before back to the program. Samiksha Bhattacharjee is our guest. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I am well. It's good to have you back on the show. I know there are people who are meeting you for the very first time, though, today. Take just a moment to tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, so my name is Samiksha. I'm in the UK, as you can probably tell from my accent. I'm a current student. I'm a student at University College London, and I'm also the president of the UCL Libertarian Society. And I have my own podcast platform called Samiksha's State of the Debate, which you can check out if you're interested.
Very good. I'm looking at an article that you've written, and first of all, the headline really grabbed my attention. I'm a teetotaler. Banning alcohol-free beer shows Labor's contempt for young people like me. And as I was reading through your article, I had to stop and scratch my head once or twice. Am I understanding this correctly? That the government is proposing to ban drinks that are alcohol-free for people under 18 years of age?
Yes. Basically, you've got it correct. Yeah, that's exactly what they are potentially looking at doing. And yeah, you have the exact right reaction to just scratch your head, because I mean, when I was first hearing about this, I was also scratching my head. Why is this the case? Because to me, I mean, alcohol-free beer, it doesn't contain any alcohol. So clearly there isn't a problem from a health point of view as the government would look at it. So why are they doing this?
Yeah, that was the first thing I wanted to know is what possible benefit is there to putting these off limits to those under 18?
Yeah, I mean, the argument given was that it makes drinking culture look normal. But what I would argue is that it actually normalizes sobriety. I mean, it allows a young person to be in a social setting, to be at the pub, which is, very common in Britain, or, at a party without having an alcoholic drink in their hand. It actually builds up that culture from a young age. If you ban it, then it leaves them with two choices, basically, to have to actually drink the alcohol, to actually drink the hard stuff to fit in, or to just stay home and be isolated. And we're currently going through a loneliness pandemic, especially with young people. That is not something that we want to be encouraging. We want people to go out and to mingle and to meet their friends and not have to be forced to drink alcohol. They should be able to make that choice. And the reason why, I mean, this is for under 18. So some people are arguing, well, these are kids. Well, these are people who you are giving the responsibility to, they can join the army, they pay taxes. And the Labour government is actually going to lower the voting age to 16. I mean, they can already vote in some local elections, 16-year-olds, but now they're in the next general election, they're going to be voting for the Prime Minister. So you're giving them that much responsibility, but then at the same time, you're saying, hang on a second, we're going to just coddle you because we don't think that you should be drinking alcohol-free beer. We don't think that you're clever enough to make the right decision when it comes to your drinks, but we think that you're perfectly capable of choosing the next prime minister. And that, to me, is the absolute hypocrisy here.
I love that you use the word patronizing, to say the least, when you describe this. And it also, brings up the question, where does that kind of patronization stop? Certainly it won't stop with alcohol-free drinks. Will they extend it to food, to sugar? I mean, it seems like the sky is the limit.
Yeah, I mean, if you have this same logic that, alcohol-free drinks are a gateway to the real drinks, there is zero empirical evidence that a 0% beer leads to alcoholism. If we use that same logic, okay, we should be banning veggie burgers because they might lead to a Big Mac addiction. This policy, what it does is that it treats a very harmless lifestyle choice that these people are very capable of making as if it's some kind of dangerous substance. That's essentially what they're doing. And it is completely bizarre. And yeah, I mean, like you said, the sky seems to be the limit, especially with this Labour government.
It made me think about, I think by that same logic, I could say we should probably curtail exercise because that might lead people to anorexia or CrossFit. I don't know. That maybe that last one's a cheap shot, but it's the same kind of thing. What is it that motivates these bureaucrats to propose these kinds of policies? I guess what I'm asking is, what's in it for them to enact those kind of restrictions?
I think that what they think is that I do want to give these politicians the benefit of the doubt and think that they are coming at it from a place of care and of paternalism. But as we know, paternalism doesn't necessarily lead to good outcomes generally. In fact, it usually leads to, some kind of hidden culture. What we're essentially doing is saying that these drinks are some kind of forbidden fruit. And we know that, especially with young people, that when you ban certain substances and when you say that these things are wrong, they're probably going to be drawn towards it more. So yeah, I mean, there's obviously, it's a general culture, especially in the UK. I mean, we're seeing worldwide this idea of banning social media for under 16s. It's that same logic of protecting children, but the whole policy choices and everything is coming about it from a completely, in my opinion, the completely wrong way, because we should be empowering parents to make those choices rather than handing over that control over to a faceless bureaucrat in a suit sat in an office who has no idea about the personal circumstances of your children and will never know you as well as you know your child.
I know that there are different regulations in other parts of Europe. For instance, when I have visited Germany, I've seen that the drinking age and drinking acceptance, I mean, like real alcohol, is okay. It's normalized, for teenagers. What kind of data do they have, and maybe some of the other nations in Europe where drinking isn't necessarily encouraged, but it's not penalized or outlawed, but they're allowed to do it. It seems to me that would be where they might learn to do it responsibly. Or do they have outrageous levels of alcoholism?
No, they don't. It's actually quite the opposite. I mean, the fact of the matter is that you're not making it a forbidden fruit, and so there's actually no minimum age in a lot of countries to consume alcohol at home or in private. I mean, in Britain, the age is actually 5. So from 5 years old in Britain, you're able to drink alcohol with parental permission in a private place. So in the Mediterranean, the focus is, how you drink, right? So you can drink with food, you can drink with family. But in the UK, the focus is whether you drink at all, to the point that they're now just policing drinks with 0% alcohol. So, yeah, I mean, we should really look across the English Channel and learn from our European. And, I don't say this often to learn from mainstream continental Europe, but on this, I think that they have actually made the right choice.
Well, and there's also that I guess it's conventional wisdom that says people tend to rise to the expectations that we have of them. And if you want to raise generations of capable, self-sustaining and self-actuating young people, you've got to treat them like people who can make up their own minds as to what they will or will not do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is going to create a culture of young people who feel as though, I mean, it can go two ways, right? It can lead to a generation of people who are rebellious, or it can lead to a generation of young people who feel as though they have to turn to the state, turn to the politicians in order to dictate their every move. You look at the laws and you have to think, okay, can I do this? Can I do that? That we should not be encouraging that culture, especially with our young people. We should be encouraging our young people to think for themselves, to take initiative, to take the leap. And we can never sustain a country like that if we are essentially coddling our young people and making the decisions for them.
Once again, we are visiting with Samiksha Bhattacharjee. Thank you so much for being on the program. For people who want to follow you on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, I mean, you can just look up Samiksha's State of the Debate, and yeah, you'll find me.